In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to create an emulator or Android virtual device that you can use to test or run your Android applications that you've created in Android Studio. So the reason you might want to create an emulator for use with your applications is if you don't have a physical Android device, but you still want to create Android applications, let's say, that's a perfect use for the emulator. So let's go ahead and learn how we're going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and pull up Android Studio. And once I have that open, I'm going to click this AVD Manager button right here at the top. Great, so it will open a window here. And when it does, we're going to go ahead and click on this bottom left button that says Create Virtual Device. From here, you'll notice that we're presented with another window. And we have four different tabs, or rather four different categories. We have TV, Wear, Phone, and Tablet. And these are all the different types of emulators we can create. So we can create a TV emulator, a Wear emulator. This is for, I believe, Android's new watches. We can create, a phone, and then we can lastly create a tablet. We're going to work on creating a phone. But before we get into that phone, I want to talk a little bit about these hardware profiles. So these devices are hardware profiles that have already been set up for us. They are designed to match actual devices that have been created in the real world. So for example, we have the Nexus 6, the Nexus 6P, and the Nexus S. These are a few devices that you all might know of, but we could also create some ourselves. So if we wanted to create a new hardware profile that, let's say, matched the Samsung Galaxy S6, we can click on this new hardware profile button. And what we would do is we just type in, let's say, Samsung Galaxy S6, and then we'd go on the internet and look at what the specs are for this particular device, and we would match all of these settings to whatever it is. So for example, we'd look for the screen size and put that there, the resolution, how much RAM. And the reason we might want to do all this stuff is so that we have an emulator that is suited to match exactly that device, so that we can test and make sure that we have a good experience for that particular kind of device. Hopefully that makes sense. So another cool thing is not only can we create these hardware profiles, but we can import them. So if somebody else creates them for us, we can just, import that file and it would set it all up for us. Great. So now that we know a little bit about these hardware profiles, we are going to create the Nexus 6 emulator. And you'll notice that Google has already created this Nexus 6 profile for us. So once we click on Nexus 6, we'll click on Next. And then now we are going to select the version of Android we want to run on that emulator. So one thing I want to note here is you'll notice not only do we have the different versions of Android, but we have quite a few of those different versions. So we have a lot of Lollipop. We have a lot of Marshmallow. So that begs the question, what the heck is the difference between these? Well, if you think back to when we downloaded, stuff from the SDK manager, I said, remember those system images? Well, I said we have the Intel architecture, we have the ARM architecture, and I told you that the Intel architecture is probably going to be different, or rather better, because it matches that of our architecture on our computer, so it'll run our emulator a little bit faster. We did download all the architectures though, because I said it's worth having, right? So that's what you're seeing, is you're seeing the 64-bit architecture of the Intel here for Marshmallow. You're seeing the 32-bit architecture for Marshmallow. You're seeing the ARM architecture here, but they're all Marshmallow. They just have different architectures running. I recommend that you choose either one of the Intels. It's going to run faster. So I have a 64-bit Windows 10 operating system. This would probably be a good one. Now you might be asking, well, what's the difference between these three here and these three at the top here? Well, one you'll notice is with Google APIs. That means that it has the Google apps running inside the emulator. This one does not. So this has Google Play services, these three, whenever it says with Google APIs. The ones without it do not. So if your application is using some of the Google APIs, you're going to want to make sure that you create an emulator with Google APIs, okay? Just make sure you remember that. I'm sorry, I don't mean to ramble too much, but this is important stuff I want you guys to understand. So we are going to target Marshmallow, and we are going to, I have a 64-bit Windows machine. I told you that these two are Intels and they run a little bit faster. So as I've said, 64-bit Windows with Marshmallow, with Google APIs. That sounds perfect to me. I'm going to click Next. Once I do that, you'll notice it says, okay, here's my AVD name. I'm going to leave it as is. You could certainly change it. I want to go over a few important settings now within this window. So I could, once again, change the version of Android if I just clicked here. I could change the scale. So if I leave it at auto, usually it tries to make it as big as it can on my screen. I don't really like that. It's kind of annoying. I like it a little bit smaller. And this is something you might have to experiment a little with. I find 4 dp on device per 1 pixel on the screen works well. So from there, we can click on the store snapshot for a faster startup. And what that does is, once your device, your emulator loads, it will store all of that loaded stuff in a cache somewhere so that when you load it back up, it'll be a lot faster. I find with Intel processing, or with the Intel architecture, it's already pretty quick, so I don't need to do that. But if you find yours is really slow on startup, I do recommend that you click on this, okay? So if you do click on this, though, you can't have the use host GPU. That's what it's telling you. So I'm going to leave it as is. Now we're going to go into the advanced settings here, and you'll just notice that we can do a few different things. We could set our webcam or my webcam on my computer as one of the cameras. We could set the network latency, all kinds of good stuff. The RAM, how much internal and external storage we have, all this other good stuff. One important setting I really do want to note here, though, is that it says keyboard, enable keyboard input. If this is unchecked, you can't use your keyboard on your computer as an input device. You'll have to use that on-screen keyboard, which is a pain. So I would recommend you check this. Great. So I'm going to hide these advanced settings. I'm going to click on Finish. And if we did everything properly, you'll notice now I have this Nexus 6 API 23. And I can edit that very easily by clicking on this Edit button. And that will pop up that same screen. I can also click on this arrow to duplicate, wipe data, do all sorts of this stuff, right? So I can delete it very, very easily. So now if you want to make sure that this is all working, we can click Exit. We'll click on this play button once more. And if we have this device as selectable, then everything is working properly. So you'll notice it says Launch Emulator, and you'll notice that Nexus 6 API 23 is in that list. So we did everything properly. Now we can use that emulator. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. I'm sorry if I rambled a little bit. I just wanted to make sure that you knew what all the different settings are, because that could be pretty confusing. I'll see you in the next video.